Well, CJ Ram, and a pleasant good morning to all of our viewers and listeners, and welcome to another edition of the program Addiction and Recovery. I am your moderator this morning, Jason Kalu, and it's a brand new month. Here's wishing each and every one of you, wherever you are right now, tuning in right now, a wonderful and productive month ahead. And of course, without further ado, let me introduce the host to the program Addiction and Recovery, Mr. Ramnes Dwarka. CJ Ram to you, sir.
Jason, and thank you very much for having me on the program. And let me join with you in welcoming all our listeners, both in Trinidad and Tobago and worldwide and on social media, who are joining with us every Thursday at this time. And they know that this program is also repeated at 10 in the night on the same media house. And it will be posted on YouTube under my name and on Facebook as well. So those of you who get caught up with other things, you can always recover the information and use the information given on the program. As we start this program, I'd like to give a shout out to two people I visited over the last week. One is my nephew, Surendra Narayan, who is not so well. He's a little bit under the weather these days. And my wife's cousin, Haina, from Vancouver. And, I felt so encouraged by these people. In spite of their illness, they were all cheerful, they were all in good spirits, and it reminded me of a very important principle, Jason, and that is that good health is not the absence of illness. Good health is not the absence of illness, because we all were born with at least about 10 cancers, and these remain dormant until in some of us, it becomes malignant, it bursts out eventually and presents itself. So that if any one of us were to wait until we are in perfect health to start living fully, you know what would happen? We would never ever live fully. So I am saying to all our listeners this morning, very important, don't die before you are dead. A lot of us, because we meet with not only our health condition, but we have psychological conditions, we have social problems, some challenges sometimes, and we give up. And when we give up, we are almost like resigning ourselves to failure. So I want to say to these two people, I felt very encouraged by visiting them. And again, on this program, we have said in the past, Jason, the way to be happy is to make others happy. And I want to thank the group for presenting those videos at the beginning of the program, and on the 12 steps and the way to identify a person who is using, and some very factual information about withdrawal symptoms in men and women and so on. I want to thank you and the staff for this, and to let our listeners know that, that any one of us can become ill. Some illnesses, we have no control over at all. And in the AA program, there's also a paradox. There are many paradoxes. There is one paradox, that is, you have to surrender to win. And a paradox is something that on the surface, as it is presented, appears to be controversial. If you surrender, generally, when you surrender, people will think, well, you have lost, you have thrown the towel in, you have given up. But with some situations like alcoholism and drug addiction in particular, until you surrender, you really can't win. Meaning, if you don't accept that you have no control over your alcohol and drug again, that you have become compulsive in its use, until you don't accept that, you will always be trying to control it. You will have what is called reservations. And reservations are good for airline companies and all of that, hotel industry, but not for alcoholics and drug addicts. To have reservations is meaning to leave the door ajar, that the addiction could always come in, so that you have to totally surrender, mean that you have to accept that you're an alcoholic and an alcoholic, and you have to admit first, and then you have to accept the fact that, look, I can't drink in a controlled fashion anymore. And this is why it is very important in recovery for alcoholics and drug addicts to come to that point of acceptance. There's a lot of people who admit intellectually that they have a problem, but in their heart, they know their family sometimes. I had that experience myself. My children and my spouse at the time, they never wanted me to admit that I was an alcoholic. My wife even said, "You're not an alcoholic. You just can't drink like some people." She knew, her family and so on. But the truth is, we all would cherish the idea that we could go back and take that social drink, and have the experience, the euphoria, without getting into trouble. But at some point, you have to come to the realization, hey, every time I go to drink, if everything being equal, as we say, I will drink till I get drunk. And when I get drunk, there are different effects that the alcohol has on the individual. The effect will largely be determined by what is called the set and setting in which it is used. The person's mindset and the setting in which they use. You'll find that in the old days, when the old people after work whole day will sit down in a circle and they will light up a chillum and they'll take one pull and they will discuss the Mahabharata or the Gita or some religious text. It was a very progressive and, recreating experience, as opposed to people who go to a party and get drunk, and then next thing you know, they get into altercation because somebody stepped on their toe or somebody bounced them, and fight would start. And then there's some people with the mindset for that. And I'm sure if you let your mind go, Jason, you probably have had the experience of seeing some people inebriated, drunk. And there are some people, when they get drunk, they just start to cry for no reason. All the things that they were suppressing before, the fact that they didn't get the property they were inherited, or the wife is estranged from them, or whatever, they lost a friend or they lost a relative. It is because alcohol and drugs, they tend to relieve the inhibitions. So the guy who is sober, he's in total control of the way he presents himself. And if he's suppressing some hurt, some deep-seated anxiety or whatever, what happens when he drinks or uses drugs? He is unable, or she is unable to exercise that level of restraint. And so you'll hear people saying, he had that in his mind all the time. He just wasn't saying it. And some people go so far to say, if you really want to know the truth of what is going on in a person's mind, wait till they take a few drinks and you'll hear it. You understand? And there's some truth to all of this, because drinking has a tendency to relieve the self-restraint. It impairs the judgment, so that the person, when they're sober, would handle a situation differently as opposed to when they are drunk. And that goes across the board, whether it be in conversation, whether it be in performance, whether it be in driving, or whatever. So it is one of the consequences of drinking and drug use, in that it relieves inhibition. So that, again, there are those who, as I said, would cry, but then there are those who would get violent. The normal, quiet fellow who's well behaved and all of that, all of a sudden, after a few drinks, he challenging everybody, he feels he's Superman. And then if he had some other deep-seated animosity, it comes out and he chooses that time. And I've heard people say, wait till I'll go and take a few drinks and I'll come and sort you out. You understand? As though they will not have the courage to express themselves, And so that a lot of people have used alcohol and drugs in that way, to allow them to ventilate, deep-seated aggression and animosity and so on that they will have. So that, again, alcohol has a different effect on different people. And again, every one of us will metabolize alcohol and drugs differently. There would be the person who could take a good few drinks and still manage, to function pretty normal. And there are some people after just one or two drink, they become inebriated and dysfunctional. You understand? So that it is critical for everyone, the person themselves, to realize, hey, when I drink, what happens? How does alcohol relate to me? How, and you need to be willing to take feedback, because sometimes when a person is drunk, they reach to a point of blackout where they can't remember what happens. And when the wife would say, look, when you came home, you mash up the TV and you mash up the furniture. And the only way he would accept that is when and he would still be doubting it. Not me, I didn't do that. And honestly, he can't remember because there's something called blackout. In alcoholism, a person drinks and reaches to a certain point where they literally black out so that they can't remember. But I want to say that blackout is not a defense in law, because if under a state of blackout you committed a crime, you injured someone or you murdered someone, you will not be able to cite that as a defense in law, because I work in the magistracy, and I know that, the judge might very well tell you, but when you drink, what will happen? You'll get drunk. And when you get drunk, it's your fault, not nobody else's fault. You must take responsibility for that. But as I say that, I want to just sidetrack a little bit. The state has a responsibility here, Jason, if I have to be a little bit political, because if we are collecting the taxes from the sale of alcohol and all of that, then we have a responsibility to pick up the consequences. You understand? And we need to put things in place, because we have agreed to make alcohol legal and we collect revenue from it. And so too, not too long ago, we decriminalized marijuana as well. And we spoke about that to some extent. And I'm saying this because this morning when I picked up the newspaper, there is a 95-year-old person who went to the news media house and complained of a relative, and we could only assume that this is somebody close to her, who literally threw kerosene on her and threatened and attempted to set her afire. And she described in the body of the news report that this person is a known alcoholic and that he is always approaching her, to get money from her when she gets her pension. And she describes a situation where he actually came and stole all her money. And I am sitting there reading this and I'm thinking there are so many other people reading this. And what would be their impression? Yes, the first impression is that, you know, my heart goes out to this lady, 97 years old. And I must compliment her. She looks quite strong and able for that age. She must have taken good care of herself. And however, it is so disheartening that a relative would attack a woman at that age, a woman, you know, and so that I could imagine the whole of the society would, lay scorn at the feet of that relative who is drinking and misbehaving. And there will not be much understanding. Not that I accept or condone that behavior, but because of my own involvement in the field of substance abuse and drug addiction, and being a person in recovery as well, I do understand. I'm not making an excuse for that person. He has and should be made to take responsibility for his behavior. And I again want to compliment the victim, the lady, because she did, to my mind, make every effort to resolve the problem. She went to the police, she made reports, she went to the court, she secured a restraining order. Now, what more can she do? At this stage, I have to fault the state, because, again, let me retract that, because yes, they did execute the restraining order, and he was taken to court and he was made to pay $2,000, which he has not paid, and he's been absconding from the police, according to the report. So, yes, However, I have not only seen this case, I have in my experience as Director of Family Services and Senior Magistrates Clerk in Chabonas, I have seen so many people who secured restraining orders and yet met with severe consequences from the perpetrators, the aggressors, even though they had restraining orders. And just like the police officer is saying in the report that people have lost respect for the law. They are no longer afraid. And I agree with that. But again, the society has lost confidence in the police service, and it splashed all over the newspaper this morning to the point where the opposition leader has to come and say, look, house owners must become willing to take drastic action. And I agree with her, because if we can't be protected by the law, and the police doesn't have the resources, they're not sufficient of them, they don't have the vehicles, and they can't be everywhere at the same time, then it's not a question of blaming the government and the police, but it is a question of now doing what is necessary. Because yes, I agree, a person's home is their castle. And where are you going to run from your home? And these people, if we read the newspaper every day, you're seeing 3, 4 people being killed. These criminals, they have access to firearms, and they know that that some house owners do have, especially when you have this recent situation where the female occupant of the house took her husband's firearm and shot the invader. So that they are aware that people have guns, so they are going to come armed. I had a personal experience here myself, Jason, where I pulled up to my gate a few years ago, and there were 3 men in a stolen vehicle, one of them with a firearm, and put it to my head and demanded the keys, and took my brand new Tucson, and I gave him the key. Thank God I did not retaliate, although it crossed my mind. I had the presence of mind to remember that this vehicle is fully insured. Why am I going to put myself at risk to protect it? I did, in fact, the, the thieves took a gun and stole the vehicle. The insurance company did not have to use a gun to steal the balance of my no claim benefits. You understand? But that's what we deal with in this society. And these are some of the things I would rather our leaders attend to, rather than go on playing golf 4 times a week. You understand? Anyway, I thought I just read these news and it's in my mind, And again, this is a station where I think we are allowed conscience. I know we have a chief executive officer who does not mince his words when it comes to, and his predecessor, his father, were people. Maybe I have that similar kind of, TV Jagriti is known for its ability to call it as it is. We have the Mahasabha Strikes Back. And this is a station I know that a lot of people listen to, because you hear the whole story. You don't hear one side of the story. So coming back to the drug addiction part of this whole incident, what is being done for this man who's the alcoholic, who's identified as an alcoholic? Let's suppose when he was taken to court, and the magistrate, rather than fine him $2,000, which he or she was within their legal right to do, what if they had, I'm sure it would have brought to their attention that this man is an alcoholic. They could have and should have given him the option, look, you go to jail or you go for treatment. I know that because I did training at what is called Daytop International in New York, where they have the alternative to custody program. And do you know that the Piparo Empowerment Center, of which I was the first director, is now sitting idle? All the money and resources that were spent there is just going to waste, is collecting cobwebs, because they say, I understand that the ministry is repurposing that center. Repurposing for what purpose, I don't know. I know that there was the intention to send the homeless people there, but I can tell them before they even think about it, working in the field of social services, the homeless people are not going to stay there, and you can't imprison them. The Constitution will not allow you to keep them there against their will. In fact, even at St. Anne's, where if two psychiatrists sign off on a person, then you can keep them locked up on each ward in one of those places. But at Piparo, you can't do that. So again, it's a waste of resources. This is a misguided kind of leadership that we have where the social services are concerned. So that place should, and it was originally intended to be an alternative to custody program, so that this guy would have been ordered to go for treatment. And every week, a report from the center would have been sent to the probation officer in the United States. It would be sent to the parole officer. And based on those reports, he can either be, if his progress report is good, that he's doing well in rehabilitation, he's applying himself, he's following the program, then he's allowed to continue there. And the sentence is waived. If, however, he misbehaves or he runs away from the program, he is immediately arrested and put into prison to serve the original sentence. I could guarantee you that the outcome would have been different. The report in the newspaper today would have been far different than this lady barely survived with her life. Douse with kerosene and then have fire thrown on you. I don't know, God saved her. But I also understand that when a person has become addicted to the chronic level where your body is dependent on the alcohol, it is very difficult, if not impossible, for the person to stop, even with all the insight and knowledge and support. If they don't have the support, that they need, they're not able to do it. And I'm telling you from personal and professional experience. So that I am sure that guy would have probably done this act while he was under the influence. And yes, when he's sober next day, he would be sorry, he would be ashamed, but he has already done it. He might have even been in a blackout. Who knows? But as I said earlier on, that's not a defense in law. So that we, the policy makers in this country, we need to consult with people who are working in the trenches and develop programs that will work. And the center is still there. All the facility is still intact, and it still can be done. I hope that somebody in authority and of influence is listening to this program, and I would be willing to sit with them and discuss how this can be done. You have voluntary organizations like Rebirth House and like Heal House who are doing yeoman service on a little pittance of a subvention that they get. Some get and some don't even get from the government. But they're trying, their best to help people, and they're turning out so many people who are today. I know of every day, because of the online meetings, I can see where young people are joining the program, and there are several people from Heal House and from the other centers who are also joining the online program while they are still at the treatment facilities. That's the way to go. I must compliment the administrations of these places for that service that they're providing for the society. But I'm saying that much more can be done. The only National Drug Treatment Center, CORA, SAPTC, is nowhere sufficient. Even when I used to work there in 1988 to 2000, I worked there. There was always a waiting list, meaning that there was never ever sufficient bed space for people seeking in-house treatment. And I can tell you the implications of that, Jason. When a drug addict wakes up one morning because he got beaten up last night, or he fell in a drain, or he hit his bottom, as we say, and he gets up this morning and he said, you know what? I think finally I want help. I am willing to go and get help and accept help. Help must be there, because in half an hour, when he starts experiencing the withdrawal, he will change his mind. And this is why it is critical that we have facilities available. But I want to say to those people listening that even though you may not get admitted to Cora when you want, because the relatives I know would, the first option they always want or wish for is to, look, take this guy, move him out of our face, take him to a place and fix him back, and then bring him, send him back to us. So they always seek to get the person into in-house treatment, and that is not always possible because of the lack of resources. I want to say to them, don't be disheartened, because even if you get the person to go to Cora, it's only for 6 weeks. They will come out again and be in the same milieu, among the same friends who are drinking and all of that. So yes, in-house treatment is very useful because it gives a temporary reprieve, a sanctuary where the person can be in a place, a safe place where they can't have access to the drug. And after 6 weeks of staying sober, they begin to see the benefits of staying sober. And with the counseling and all of that, a lot of them come out. And if when they come out of Cora and Heal House and Rebirth House and New Life Ministries, if they find themselves in AA and NA, research has shown that they have a very good chance of staying sober for prolonged periods of time, if not for the rest of their life. But the point is, when they come out, they still have to live in the society, so that the people who go to the outpatient program or who go to AA directly and they're staying in their communities and going to meetings and staying sober, they have a better chance, I would say, because they are staying sober where they need to stay sober. They are staying sober in the environment with all the temptations there, rather than people who go in house treatment for 6 weeks and they have what we call pajama sobriety. While they are there, they are sober. But as soon as they come down the hill, first thing on their mind, they go and get drunk. You understand? So, to my mind, the stronger programs are the outpatient programs where you stay at home and you go to the outpatient program at Cora, or you stay at home and you go to the AA meetings and you're staying sober. Eventually, when you can stay sober in the milieu, then you really have solid sobriety. You can have prolonged and long-term sobriety. So that's why I'm saying to our listeners today that you don't necessarily have to go to an inpatient treatment. You can do it on your own, and anyone out there listening, if you or a relative or a friend or anyone you know, once they're willing to do something about their drinking or drug use, there are resources. You can call me at 671-3040. I know a lot of people call the radio station, Jason, and they get my cell number from there. I don't mind, because my own philosophy is, if in this lifetime of mine, Jason, I can help one person to turn away from drugs and prevent them from going on that precipice, then my own life would be justified. And as I say this, I want to say how grateful I am to the Hindu Women's Organization, because they provided me with a forum on Saturday. They are running very, very valuable courses for young people in the central area. Well, I think it's for anyone who is interested. It is held every Saturday at 2 p.m. at the Balmain Temple. And when I went there on Saturday, I was privileged to see the young people doing yoga. And the yoga teacher was doing such a beautiful job, because I practice yoga myself. So I had the opportunity to sit down and listen to a young lady, so gentle with a beautiful voice, taking the students through the breathing exercises and explaining to them the benefits of the various asanas, the position. And I want to say that for anyone in recovery, it would be one of the best choices as well to supplement your recovery by doing yoga and meditation, because step 11 of the AA program, as was read at the beginning of the program, will tell you that AA members, they seek through prayer and meditation to obtain conscious contact with God. Conscious contact mean just like me and you talking, Jason, not unconscious contact, not dreaming, not imaginary. You can develop a relationship where you can talk to God and you can have access to God all the time. And I saw these children, and after that, they sat, and the lecture was for 2 hours, and not one of them, and not only the children, some of the administrators who were there started to listen to what I was saying, and they all came and gathered around, and I encouraged them to ask questions, and it was a beautiful program, interactive. In fact, the coordinator at the end complimented me, and she said, I was speaking to them as a parent would speak to their family. And to me, that was one of the most beautiful compliments I've had in a long time. In fact, the president sent me a beautiful note expressing her gratitude, Mrs. Tiwari, that she had gotten reports. Unfortunately, she couldn't have been there herself, but she had gotten reports from the people. And I saying this to say that I like to make myself available to all organizations, Jason, temple groups, organizations, to if they would wish for me to come and speak to their audiences. Because when you have these occasions, let me say this, um, a lot of times, not many people are interested in coming to listen to anyone about substance abuse or drug addiction. Well, clearly, the alcoholic and the drug addict, they're not coming because they are in denial. They don't want even anybody to even think they have a problem. And the relatives as well, Jason. They don't want anybody to know that one of theirs have a problem with alcohol. So at these, if I sent out an invitation and take a microphone, I went to the community and said, look, we're going to have a lecture on alcoholism. You know what? You're not going to get very many people coming because not only the addict and alcoholic is in denial, but their family is in denial, and this society is in denial. This is why we are not really putting so much resources into substance abuse. We think it is their fault. They're just wicked. They're mean. Even people who should know better. I remember when I was working at Cora Hospital, the other staff from the other wards, they, they, they didn't want to even bring food for the patients. And they would often, accuse the substance abuse unit as encouraging these people who are wicked. They go and they drink rum and they use drugs, and now we are fattening them up. There's so much stigma and intolerance for people who are alcoholics because a lot of people out there in the society see alcoholics and drug addicts as deviants, as people who just wouldn't conform. Yes, there's some little trend of truth in that, because alcohol, as we said earlier on, it relieves inhibition and it gets you into trouble. But most alcoholics, and being one myself, can tell you, we are not stupid people. We are not bad people. But under the influence, we'll do all kinds of stupid things. And most of us would regret it the next day. But it's already done. And this is why people in recovery, they have a lot of amends to make. They have a lot of correcting to do. And this is why there are very few people who can just put down the glass and decide to tough it out and, decide not to drink again. But the majority, they need help. They need to develop new coping skills because a lot of people started to use drugs to help them to cope with anxiety, with depression. Some of them were self-medicating, using it like you would use pills because alcohol does make you feel sleepy. It's a sedative. You understand? It also can have tranquilizing effects. So a lot of people were using the medication, and when the medication was not doing it, they were supplementing it with the alcohol. And I have seen a few of them, and we'll speak about that maybe the next program, because professionals who prescribing these psychotropic drugs, they need to develop an exit strategy for the patients. You can't be telling a patient that they'll have to take this drug for the rest of their life because the chemical in their brain is changed. That is rubbish. You understand? Yes, when you drink, you become dependent, you suffer with withdrawal. But if you stop using the drug, you start eating the proper foods, exercise, and rest, your brain is going to, the withdrawal symptoms will all go away. But if you go and start taking this pill and that pill to deal with the withdrawal symptoms, now you have a bigger problem. Only this week I had to see a patient, who was being prescribed with some of these psychotropic drugs because of anxiety and all of that. And if you went and took these drugs, or I went, even though we don't have anxiety, in a little while, when we become dependent on them and they are wearing away from the body, we are going to go into withdrawal. And the first symptoms of withdrawal of these anti-anxiolytics and psychotropic drugs is insomnia and anxiety and depression and you name it. It's a whole set of them. And I can tell you from working in that fraternity, I work at St. Anne's Hospital. I worked at Ward 8 Hospital, which is a psychiatric unit. I worked at Cora Hospital. I worked at Ward 1 in San Fernando. I worked with some of the most prominent psychiatrists in Trinidad, and I know what happens. I'm not blaming the psychiatrists here, the doctors. Sometimes you have to prescribe these drugs because a person is going to become a disaster to themselves or to other people. But whenever these drugs are prescribed, you need to work out an exit strategy so that the person could be weaned and get off this. Now, I know, let me add quickly, a lot of people, we Trinidadians, we're too smart for our own good. We read the label and see what drug the doctor prescribed, and then we go to the pharmacy, and some of these pharmacies are very unscrupulous people. They operate it like it's a rum shop without the responsibility that should accompany these things. And a lot of people are able to get these drugs under the counter. And so they don't have to go back and pay the doctor a visit. And now they start prescribing for themselves. And it doesn't take long, but after a little while, the 2 milligram can work. So you go and buy the 5 and then the 10. And I have had patients here who have been taking doses of sleeping pills that if you took it, you'll drop dead immediately. But they have developed tolerance. I had one guy who had at least 5 people every day shopping from pharmacy to pharmacy, or he could afford the resources. All his money was going towards procuring boxes of sleeping pills so that he could sleep. You understand? I have worked with doctors who had become dependent on medication, sleeping medication, and then couldn't get themselves off because common sense will tell you, Jason, you can't use pills to treat prescription pill addiction. You understand? But if you went to a doctor, what does they have in the toolbox? It's pills and injection. You understand? So this is something that we need to look at closely, because if you're not part of the solution, then you are part of the problem. And yes, there are some professionals who are really, really acting very irresponsible. You understand? So again, there are drugs that affects the body, there are drugs that affect the mind, there are drugs that affect the relationship, and our spiritual. I know as soon as we get to talking, we reach the time starts running out. But all human beings, we are bio, psycho, social, spiritual beings. And alcohol and drugs affect not only the biological man, the bones, muscles, and organs, it affects the psychological person as well. That is their self-esteem and their coping skills. It affects their relationship on the job, at home, with their parents, and with God as well. So that anyone developing a program to help a person to stop using drugs must attend to the biopsychosocial spiritual needs of the patient. And this is why medicine is failing, Jason, because we have mostly concerned ourselves with the biological person, and we have not been paying so much attention to the psychological, the social, and the spiritual. I must commend Alcoholics Anonymous, because once you stop using, in a little while you'll get over the withdrawal symptoms, and then they help you with the coping skills, the psychological person, the social person, and the spiritual person. And this is why AA has become the most successful program in the world. in terms of helping alcoholics and drug addicts to stay sober. And I want to recommend it to anyone listening and anyone who would like to access an AA meeting. We have our AA meetings that have resumed physically, that is in the schools and wherever they used to be. Indeed, in Felicity here, we have a meeting at the Felicity Hindu School on a Friday night at 7, on Sunday evenings at 6. Then in the Presbyterian School, we have one on Saturday night at 7, on Monday night at 7. And for good measure, we have another one that meets on a Wednesday night at 7 in the farmlands. That's in the gardens here. You know, that was started during the COVID and still functioning. So you have 5 meetings right here. And then we have online meetings where you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to even disclose your identity to anybody. You can remain anonymous. And there's a lot of women, young women, who are honest enough to recognize that they have a problem with alcohol, and young men coming to the online meetings now. And I thank God for that, because I'm privy to I attend some of these meetings myself, you know, and I keep track of what's happening, because that's what we are talking about here on every Thursday. So anyone who think they have a problem with drugs or alcohol and they would like to get help, or if you have a family member, or if you belong to a group that you would like me to come and speak to, please give me a call. I could be reached at 671-3040. Or of course, you could call Jason at the station, and you'll get the information. And I want to thank you, Jason, and thank the station as well for hosting this program every week. It's really providing a great service to our community, not locally alone, but I get comments from abroad as well. So thank you again.
Yes, always a pleasure having you on your show with us. And like Mr. Dwarka said, in terms of substance abuse, the best thing to do, you have to surrender to win. All you have to do is take that first step. I'm Jason Kalu, staying seated for now.